Hey, I'm Sage Plays. Welcome to Bellemont Zoo, where today we're going to be creating a habitat inspired by one of my favourite zoo buildings on the planet for one of Planet Zoo's latest animals, the gorgeous new Ocelot. Let's go! We're going to start by building one of the most detailed things we've ever built, an old weathered slab of concrete, which is going to be the foundation stone for this massive aviary. And while we do that, I'll tell you about why we're building this. A couple of years ago, I went to Amsterdam, and while I was there, I visited one of Europe's classic zoos, ARTIS. And in and amongst all the incredible buildings in that zoo was something absolutely beautiful. Now, regular viewers of the channel will know my infinite struggles with the Dutch language, but I believe it is called the Vogelhuis, which means the birdhouse. It was originally built back in the 19th century as a monkey house, and then at some point it was converted into a birdhouse, and then more recently into a walk-through birdhouse. And ever since I saw it, I wanted to recreate this building in Planet Zoo. But obviously we're pretty short on flying birds in Planet Zoo, and I'm pretty short on small monkeys and things like that would be suitable for it as well. And I ended up using all the species I had earmarked for this house, like the sloth and the capuchin, for our From Amazon to Andes house instead. And then when the America's Animal Pack came out, one of the animals in there, the Ocelot, is something that I thought could actually work in this house. I've seen cats kept in this style of aviary before, and with the Ocelot being pretty small, I think we can create something that would work really well for it. It's going to be absolutely packed full of plants. It's basically going to be a jungle in an aviary. It's definitely one of the most complex builds that we've attempted in this zoo. So let's get stuck into it. We've got a big slab of plaster here, which I'm about to cover up with a piece of concrete. I've used some of the smaller plaster blocks as they've got a nice rounded edge on it, which is going to make this look better. And then we've completely covered it in decals, and by colouring them to the same or just slightly different to the concrete, and then mixing in some bits of moss and darker concrete and things like that, we can get this really weathered look, which I really like. We're going to use this one as a building block for the entire aviary, and then later on we'll go in and customise each one so we get different textures and decay on each piece. I didn't intend to do this, but pretty much the entire frame of the aviary is going to be constructed with pieces from the America's Animal Pack and the Zookeeper's Animal Pack, because they have got loads of really useful small pieces of metal in them, which is really, really useful for building stuff like this. The aviary is really tall. It's so impressive when you're standing in front of it. And we're going to put some custom mesh in a second. But before we do that, we're going to make the framework that the mesh is going to sit in. So we're using some of the Grasslands Animal Pole and some of hinge number 2 here, just to get the supports for the mesh and have them attached to the main supports for the aviary. And then we're going to grab another new piece and use this to make another support which sits at the top of the first really tall piece of mesh before we get onto a slightly shorter piece of mesh, and then the beautiful curved roof which we'll build in a second. We'll use the new Fiesta Ranch Gate hook to make the pins that are going to hold this support in place. We'll just have a couple of those on either side of it. I'm so glad they made this flexi colour. Absolutely love this new piece. We'll copy these two over to the other side, and then we can move on to the mesh. The real building has very modern, very thin mesh. So tiny little squares, really thin material, and basically if you're not right next to the habitat, it essentially disappears. You can't even see the mesh, and by mesh standards it gives you a really good view. We don't have anything like that in Planet Zoo, so we're going to make our own. We're going to take the square mesh pieces, and once we've got them arranged perfectly in this frame here, then we're going to double them up and then move them in between the lines, so that what we end up with is mesh where the holes are half the size that they would be normally. It takes a lot of work, and once we start creating the curved mesh at the top, it's even more work, but it is really worth doing because it gives it a completely unique look, much closer to the real habitat. Just one more piece of mesh to place and we're done, so we'll get that into the right spots, and there we go, that's one panel of mesh done. We'll make the next bit, and then we'll take this divider, move it up, and then spin it around to give it a different look. And this will be the divider between the straight part of the mesh and then the curved part of the mesh that forms the roof. So once we've got that in the right place, we'll get rid of these hooks. We don't need any nails up here. And then we can start building the roof. We're going to build the roof using the curved metal pieces from the Zookeeper's Animal Pack. So we're going to point one of these inwards. We'll colour it the same as the rest of it in a second. And then we'll take another one and curve that in the opposite direction so that they're going to meet in the middle. Originally I built all of this using the 2-metre metal pieces. I realised it wasn't curved enough, didn't give us enough height, so I'll go back and replace them with the 4-metre pieces in a second. I'm just going to show you how we get the curved mesh in. So each piece of mesh we placed in and then spun so it roughly follows the curve of the metal poles. And then once we've got one in the right place, we can just keep copying it and duplicating it so we can get that smaller, finer mesh that we created at the bottom. Once we've got all the mesh in, then that is one section of the beautiful curved front of this aviary created, and we can take that one section and start duplicating it and using it to create the front of the building. This section here is being grouped. We're going to grab it, and then with angle snap turned on, we're going to rotate it twice and then move it so it exactly joins up with the original. There we go. And then we will do that again, grab it, rotate it twice, and move it into position. You can see where we're going with this. Once this little bit is in place, we can carry on the other side. And then finally, we will move this one last piece into position here. There we go. We've got the beautiful arched section of aviary that forms the centerpiece of this build. And then we can start building the sides. We'll drop this piece in here. And then if we zoom out and take a look at it, you can see it's exactly the same as the front piece, so we need to turn this into the actual sides. We're going to use even larger curves here, and then bring this across so it reaches to the back of where we want this aviary to reach to. We use some of the straight metal poles to bridge the gap between the front and the back to create a new section that we can build from, and then we can copy this down both sides, do the same rotating trick to get some curved ends to the aviary in, and with that done, the shell of the aviary is complete. Let's take a look. And then we can move on to the building that sits behind the aviary. In the original building, this is a walkthrough area where you can go and see Inca terns and lots of other beautiful birds. But for the purposes of this build, we're going to be using this as the shelter for the Ocelot. So we don't need to do any detailing on the inside. There'll be no guests going in here, but I do want to make the outside look just as beautiful as the original. So we're going to use some of the classic pieces here and this beautiful roof from the Twilight pack, which is Flexicolor. Really useful. I love that shade of blue. That's copied directly from the original building. And then we'll use some of the Indonesian bricks and recolor those for the walls. And always a good idea if you want to make the building look more realistic, split the ends off into a separate group, and then you can just recess those slightly under the roof, makes it look much more realistic. I'll switch those windows out for better ones in a minute, but it's time now to move to the inside of the aviary and start doing the planting. First thing we're going to do is create a false floor here using mulch pieces so we can get the bottom of the habitat up to the same level of the concrete bricks that we started this with. Give much better viewing for the guests of the Ocelot if we do that. So we'll fill this all in with the mulch pieces, using all sorts of different sizes, making sure they always overlap so we get a smooth look to it. A few circular pieces in the front here to fit the archway, and then we'll start dropping in some of the tropical plant panels just to fill in a few gaps and give it a bit of a different look. If we sink them down into the mulch, you don't get that square look, you can get a much more natural look, and we can cover up the edges of those later. And then we need to turn this into an actual habitat. So we'll clear some space for a door in that mesh, drop a door in, and then replace these bits of the wall, as always, with some panels so that we can recess the door into the wall, make it look more realistic. And then for a finishing touch, we'll get some of the grunge decals in as well, where the metal is touching the brickwork. I think we're also going to drop in just a little lip at the bottom of all those concrete bricks, just to increase the realism, and then we can get stuck into the proper planting with some custom plants and trees. There are some really distinctive palms and all sorts of tropical trees and plants in this aviary, and I want to create some new plants ourselves to replicate those. It's easy to forget how good you can get tropical planting even in a part of Europe that isn't very warm, like the Netherlands. And believe me, in real life, it looks like a real jungle in here, and that is what we want to recreate. We're going to use some of the smallest dune palms here to create our own custom palms. There's a couple of these right at the front of the habitat, and then there's some big tall palms that go right the way up to the roof of the aviary behind, with vines all over them that the Ocelot's going to be able to climb between. That's kind of another mini centerpiece within the centerpiece, so I want to create that here. We're going to use the date palm as a base. I want to use the middle-sized one because the leaves at the top are the right size for this habitat, and then we're essentially going to spin it upside down and copy it on top of itself to get the trunk longer so that it's tall enough. If we use the largest of the date palms, the leaves will actually go way outside of the mesh, which we don't want, so we're going to have to go custom here. Once we've got the palm in the right place and at the right angle, that looks good. We'll have a quick check to make sure that the leaves aren't sticking out the top of the aviary and get it as high as we can without that happening. And now we can place it down. and then clone it and use it upside down to extend the length of the trunk. There's the thicker piece at the bottom of the trunk, and we're just going to copy loads of those in until we get a seamless looking trunk that takes us right down to the level of the mulch. We'll use the very end of the largest date palm just to make that progression of the trunk look a bit more natural. And then we'll copy in 2 more of these trees to frame this one. And then it's time for something that we've not seen on the channel for a long time, Planet Zoo Masters. This technique is all about visibility, so the view through this mesh is not great, and there's a trick they use in real zoos which we can replicate here. If we select the mesh by hitting I to go into multi-select and then holding Alt and clicking it, and then change the colour to make it much darker, you can instantly see through the mesh way better. They paint mesh black in real zoos to achieve this effect, and it works just as well in Planet Zoo. And the FlexiColor select technique using I and then Alt makes this so much easier. We'll do the rest of the mesh like that so we can see all the beautiful plants we're about to put in, and then it's back to the build. I'm not happy with these palms yet. I think they need some more work doing on them. So we're going to use some of the saltwort bush and some of this dry grass to get some more interest on the trunk, make it look a bit more like a real palm tree. And then something else I noticed in the real habitat was this big sort of shock of yellow foliage that was actually coming through the mesh out into the guest area. So I wanted to create that. We're going to use the dry saltwort bush again, and then some of the dry Nataria bushes as well. We'll spin the Nataria upside down to get some fronds coming out of the main body of the plant. We'll use a few copies of that and position them till it starts to look natural, some of them a bit higher than the others. And then we'll do the same thing with the saltwort plant upside down as well. These 2 plants are some of the most versatile in the game. We use them so often, especially the Nataria bushes, but the saltwort bush is really good as well. And then we can put it into the habitat, and with a few adjustments we get this really natural looking plant that appears to be growing through the mesh. We're also going to put some epiphytes on the trees as well, and then we'll get the vines in that the ocelot's going to be able to climb along, so we get a bit more visibility of the ocelot in the habitat. We'll take these from one of the palms at the back up to one of the palms at the front, get it in the right position so it joins up with the existing vine, get the angle right, and then extend it out so it appears to be resting against the mesh. But before we complete this build, we need to take a quick detour to the bush dogs. Last week I told you that I couldn't find a care manual for the bush dogs, and asked if there were any zookeepers out there who knew about bush dog care and whether or not they would need anti-climb barriers. And a brilliant German zookeeper apprentice called Quirks replied and told me that bush dogs can climb chain link fences very easily, and the answer is yes. So here is the bush dog habitat with its new anti-climb barriers. They are modified versions of the ones that we built for the main walls. Our bush dogs are not going to be escaping anytime soon, and a big thank you to Quirks for the information. Back to the build, all the rest of the plants are in, and what we're going to do now is get some rock walls in to make the back of the habitat look more natural and block out the view of the bottom of the building. So we're going to use the South American style rocks that we created for From Amazon to Andes. I keep getting asked to put these on the workshop, so I'll try and remember on Wednesday, as well as uploading this habitat, I'll upload some of our rock work in a separate pack for you as well. And with those in, it's time to do some final finishing touches on the concrete at the front, just putting some more different decals in with scratches in the rock work and things like that, just to make sure each panel is unique and it doesn't look like it's being copy and pasted. And we'll also put some grunge decals on the top just so it's not shining perfect white. And then we're going to build some little custom signs to let people know what's in here, using some more new pieces from the America's Animal Pack. We've used the same signs throughout this zoo for consistency, but seeing as this is a recreation, I thought it would be fun to recreate the actual signs that they have at this habitat IRL. So we're going to use these tiny little pieces from the new pack, and then the hooks as well, to create a really delicate, slim sign that's just a little different from the other ones that we have throughout the zoo. Another new piece on the top. We'll angle that down, and then we can put the smallest billboard on there. With some custom graphics, we'll have a lovely little sign. All that remains is the finishing touches on the inside of the habitat, starting with a little sleeping platform for the ocelot. I say little, this ended up a lot bigger than I wanted it to be. Cats always seem to want to sleep in something that's only fractionally larger than them. The whole, if it fits, I sit. But this is Planet Zoo, so I had to make it bigger than I wanted. But we've got some of the sleeping hay up here, so that they will hopefully actually sleep up here. Might see a little shot of that in the cinematics at the end. Now finally, we'll just drop in the enrichment items, and that is our beautiful Ocelot Aviary completed. Let's check it out. I've probably said this before, but this might be my favourite thing in the zoo. I'm not sure I've ever been as happy with the recreation as I am with this one. The level of detail on here, the way the mesh works, I think it's really close to the original, apart from the fact that we've only recreated the centre of the original building rather than the whole thing. and it does seem to work really nicely for the Ocelot. He's only pretty small, and he's got a lot of room to move around in here. And like I said, with the palace cats, it's not about how large a cat's habitat is, it's about how varied it is and how many opportunities to display their natural behaviours it allows. There is a lot of vertical space in this habitat, of course, and it's also full of branches and trees for them to climb. And how beautiful does he look on his sleeping platform in the evening sunlight here? This is where we started today, and just below the Africa section at the top, here is our latest building. So whereabouts in the zoo will we be building next week? Well, you'll just have to wait till then to find out. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you to all of those who've joined the Explorers Club. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here, and I'll see you again next week for some more Planet Zoo.